That's a big one. We were raised in it. My parents were professional musicians. When my dad worked a regular job, and they played in clubs 5-6 nights a week. And he finally quit his regular job, and they raised us and fed us playing in local clubs and VFWs and wherever they could make a living. And back in them days, there was house bands, so they would have a gig for like 2 months, 4 or 5 days.
As kids, of course, we found our own musical alleys, or whatever you want to call them. But music was always a huge part of our lives as kids.
Vaudeville?
It was, yeah, vaudeville. Yeah, no, it was country and pop and just lounge music. They were lounge musicians, so they did everything. They basically covered everything that was current at the time, which was in the late 60s, early 70s, mid 70s, so it was pretty cheesy. That's our musical background. Yeah, and they encouraged us to play. We were 12, 13, 14 when we picked up instruments, and they would let us play in their gigs. They'd bring us up and let us play something pretty cheesy in their club gigs, and they raised us with that. They raised us in that environment, and we just fell in love with
Yeah, that's a hard one. I like everything musical, as long as it's musical. I do not like electronic music. I guess it's a lot to do with my background. Anything that comes from somebody's heart and soul, that's I like anything that you can discern is from someone's heart. It doesn't matter what genre it is. It could be country, it could be folk, it could be blues, it could be rock, but you can tell if it's coming from somewhere deep within a person that makes it different.
Well, the blues thing for me happened after I met Bruce. Back in the mid-'90s after I moved.
Excuse me, who is Bruce?
Bruce Andrews.
Mm-hmm.
But I've known Bruce for 20-something years. He used to run a coffee shop, and we hooked up there, and I did sound for him, and then we started writing music, and he turned me on to this thing. And I fell in love with it. I love the roots aspect of it. I love the primitive aspect of the old stuff.
As odd as it seems, I've heard many names, and I've listened to a lot of different bass players, but I don't compare it with anybody. I think the biggest influence I had was Jaco Pastorius back in the early 80s.
It's 50-50. I mean, I love it. I'm passionate about it. I go to festivals a couple times a year and disappear. My wife lets me go to the Biscuit and to Clarksdale several times a year just to kind of get it out of my system. And I love the roots. I love the roots of where it all comes from. And I don't know why, other than it just touches me at some kind of primitive level. I love going to Clarksdale and playing with Heather Cross and Walt Busby and Bill Abel and a lot of those guys from Clarksdale. But here I'm more inspired when I play with my brother, who I've been playing with since I was 13 years old. He was 11. Pretty ridiculous, actually, if you think about it. I mean, 73 or 74, we started our first band together, and we've been playing together ever since, except for a few years in between there when we weren't in the same place. But it's if there's one person, it'd be my brother that is the most influential to me right now, and Bruce. Me and Bruce write I mean, we just write music together. We've been doing it for 20 years, and it's a different place. But what we do, what me and Jack do, is different. It's family.
The most important musicians to me are the ones that are in my daily life, to be honest with you. My kid Phil, Bruce Andrews, George Dudley, my brother, they're the ones that allow me to do what I do. And it's just being involved with them on a daily basis allows that to happen.
Well, I mean, I was impressed by a lot of the British guys originally, because we all came up in the 70s, you know, and everybody was kind of stealing from the old dudes, you know, Clapton and Led Zeppelin and the Allman Brothers, and all them guys were really influenced by that, and so that was unknown to me. I didn't know where that came from, and then when I met Bruce, I got kind of educated where that came from, and then I started appreciating, you know, Muddy Waters and Robert Johnson, and where those guys actually figured out where, you know, what they were doing. They were copying those guys, and I love it. I love them guys, and so, but probably the, you know, Clapton and you know, a lot of the British rock guys that were kind of reproducing that sound is more of an influence to me than even the old guys until, you know, I was 40.
An instrument builder. I build very unusual, non-traditional instruments for the most part. It all started several years ago because I'm a fretless bass player, and as a teenager I heard Jaco Pastorius play, and I plucked the frets out of my 63 Fender Precision bass, which would be worth a fortune now, but I didn't know back then, and started playing fretless bass, but I could never find one in the store that sounded the way I wanted it to sound. So the way I started building instruments was that I've always been a woodworker, and I decided that I'd build one, you know, for myself, because I could never find the sound I was looking for in a manufactured instrument. So that's, I mean, it's a passion of mine more than a profession. I have a lot of my instruments are actually in some of the biggest names in the world's hands, but it's not. To me, it's more of a passion to do that when I feel like doing it. It's more of an art form than it is an actual business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll probably just play with the Lucky Stiffs.
That's the name.
Which will be you know, kind of blues based. We kind of touch on some standard stuff, but we kind of make our own twist on it too, because everybody in the band comes from a different place, so we kind of meld all our influences in there. It could be anything from really raw, muddy stuff mixed with David Gilmour and Jaco Pastorius. You know, that's kind of what the Lucky Stiffs is
Sounds
about.
interesting.
It's not as much of a professional career as I'd like it to be, or I have always. I mean, it's always been a dream of mine to be nothing but a musician. But growing up in a family where I actually watched that happen, where my parents' bread and butter was being musicians, kind of changed a lot of that for me. I didn't want to necessarily spend every waking hour playing music because it becomes work.
I'm a carpenter and a jack of all trades, and get out there and do what I got to do to buy groceries. I think it covers a whole lot of ground. The concept of what blues has influenced over the years is this gigantic palette of different things. I am 100% sold on what Robert Johnson and all them guys were doing, and where they came from, and what they were saying, and what they were complaining about as the pure root of the thing. But all these things that came out of it, the Rolling Stones, who are the biggest purveyors of them fathers that have probably ever lived. If it wasn't for them, half those dudes wouldn't even be known to us. The pure, I have a problem with people who opine that's blues and that's not blues. I have a problem with that because in reality, it all comes from that root. It's like Adam. It all comes from that root. We're all branches from that root, and it doesn't matter to me whether it's Southern rock or blues rock or country or these guys that are really trying to harken back to the original guys, the old dudes paying respects. I'm all about all of it. I don't complain. Like when I go to IBC, you always the IBC in Memphis. Yeah. Everybody's got an opinion. we can go to the to the obvious. We all have asshole. It's all legitimate to me. I don't have a problem with somebody who says I'm a blues rock band. I'm not that guy that says, "What do you mean blues? You ain't blues." I don't have a problem with that. It's all we're all kind of given respect to the fathers of who invented the sounds and that dirt road thing that we all turned into rock and roll. I mean, we're respecting those guys. We're not disrespecting those guys. We're taking it to the next obvious place. And so I almost answered your question. The purity of the art form to me is important in a historical sense, but it's totally legitimate to me in the recent.
That's what I understood. Yes.
Me and Bruce might start a groove, probably 75% of the time it roots from us, but everybody adds their thing. That's what makes us who we are. Is Bruce might write the lyric and I might write a hook on the guitar, but then everybody else contributes and there's no boss, and it's wonderful and it's original and it's organic, and that's kind of where we come from.
I just say follow your heart. I mean, that's all I do. When I build an instrument, every single one of them is different depending on my mood, depending on my thought at the time. I mean, there's no formula in the way I look at it. There's just no formula in any of it. I mean, it's art. How do you define art?
I've seen a whole bunch of 14-year-old guitar slingers come up and that don't understand where they're coming from, where the roots are to what they're doing, and mama's telling them that they're the greatest thing ever, and some club owner thinks they're the greatest thing ever. They're just another one of 10,000 dudes doing the same thing. The only thing I could say is find your own voice. Learn from the masters. Learn the basics. You're not gonna know anything about music if you don't know where the root of what you're doing is coming from. But once you figure out how to write a song or start sounding good on your own, then twist it into your own thing. Just be yourself rather than trying to be Stevie Ray Vaughan. Nothing pisses me more off than watching another Stevie Ray Vaughan clone who claims to be a great guitar player or whose parents claim he's a great guitar player. Be your own guy.
I want to be remembered to be the best husband and dad that I could ever be remembered for.
That's the most important thing.
That's it. That's all that matters.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. Great.
Thank you.
That's okay for me.
People in Belgium are
Thank you,
thinking,
man.
what the hell does that mean?